Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to welcome you to our second pop-up seminar in our pop-up seminar series titled Ethics and Injustices in International Affairs. I'm Sylvia Maier. I'm on the full-time faculty here in the Center for Global Affairs, and I direct our concentration in global gender studies. In this coming spring semester, I'm super excited to be offering again a course on ethics and injustices, plural, in international affairs. It's a course that I've been teaching for 19 years, so it feels almost ancient. I assure you I have updated it. But it seems to me it is incredibly timely, and I hope you will enjoy either the course or our very, very brief snapshot and join it. So what is this course going to be about? The question that kind of frames our considerations is, should moral considerations play a role in international politics? And instinctively, most of us would answer yes. But once the questions become a little bit more precise, I think our thinking becomes a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more muddled. So questions that we're going to be using as as case studies, if you will, is, can war ever be just? Can the use of torture ever be justified? Is violent resistance to oppression a moral right? Is the promotion of democracy a new form of imperialism? Should culture ever be allowed to limit the right of a woman to healthcare, education, or control over her own body? In parentheses, no. But those of you who know me, you would probably anticipate that answer. It becomes a little bit more global and I think a little bit more complicated in a very interesting way once we start talking about very current policy areas, such as biodiversity. Is biodiversity protection in Africa just another form of colonialism? Slum tourism, super, super popular in countries such as Brazil or South Africa. Is that just another form of voyeuristic poverty porn, or does it actually serve as a catalyst for urban regeneration? Many of us would say, no, we would never do that. Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. Other questions, it's just a short sample, is how can we measure the social impact on communities, positive and negative, of mass sports events such as the Olympics? So for instance, in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, entire areas were razed to make space for Olympic stadiums. Well, it was justified with the argument that the revenue that the Olympics would bring in would way make up for building new buildings, new districts for the displaced population. Little did they know that the districts were far away from their homes, where they had lived for many, many, many years, even decades, and from their communities. It really tore communities apart. And on a more theoretical level, we will discuss, and this is something that I feel incredibly passionately about, and those of you, who know me know that, so let me reinforce it. We'll be exploring how have racism, sexism, and colonialism been generating, solidifying, and enforcing these global injustices, and what are ways in which we can unthink and dismantle these global structures of inequality and oppression, and to create a more just and equitable world. So in this seminar in the spring, in addition to going through kind of the main thinkers in the field like Kant or Frantz Fanon, for instance, we will be centering the perspectives on ethics and injustice from thinkers and advocates from all over the world. So we're making this a truly global seminar in which we will think and talk about ethics and injustices in international affairs. And for those of you who are interested in taking the course, there are no prerequisites besides a love of reading, a love of thinking, and to be very, very comfortable with uncomfortable discussions and conversations. So in the next 15 minutes or so, let's look at one issue area that we're going to be discussing, and that is, drum roll please, celebrity humanitarianism and celebrity advocacy, promotion of new colonial narratives or effective tool of change. This is a question, or this is a topic that has, especially in the field of development, received a lot of attention. it's become very popular in the last roughly 15 to 20 years, if you're a celebrity, to take on, quote unquote, a cause that that person feels very passionately about. That can be women's empowerment, that can be sexual violence against women in conflict, that can be raising awareness about genocidal politics of a friendly or not so friendly government, and trying to raise money or awareness to not only stop the genocide, but also stop our support as the American or German or whatever government of that particular genocidal government. There are many, many other causes, such as LGBT rights, that it's incredibly important to me personally. Others, for instance, fair housing, voter registration, for instance, that many celebrities and many advocates around the world have been taking up. So overall, it sounds like a very, very, very good cause, and nobody should be, prevented or judged for their willingness to actually take up a very important cause. But, and here comes the but, and this is one of the things that we're going to be discussing in our seminar in the spring, is, do celebrities, first of all, have a moral obligation to assist those in need or to use their star power for positive ends? Or is it really just one way for them to establish their brand as a global philanthropist, as an advocate for women's rights, as an advocate for LGBT rights, as somebody who stands up for disempowered and persecuted ethnic or racial or religious minorities? So is it just kind of one big marketing effort? And how do we know? And is it effective at all? Or should we just let these people, quote unquote, do what they want to do, because who cares? I mean, who's listening to Ben Affleck, right? I mean, if you want to learn about African politics, I mean, that probably would not be the person that you go to, right? Well, wrong. We'll get to that in a second. So here are some questions and thoughts to kind of guide our thoughts and kind of our possible thinking around this subject. So the question, again, to repeat, that is framing the next 10 or 15 minutes and a session in our seminar is, do celebrities have a moral obligation? With great power come great obligations. Noblesse oblige. If you have great deal of privilege, you have an obligation to give back. Or is it much more kind of muddy and much more complicated than that? So what could possible roles be for celebrities? So for instance, I'm now going to switch to the next slide. When you see that picture, for instance, on the right-hand side, you know who that is, right? The woman in the long dark hair with the black jacket. That's Angelina Jolie. She's speaking in that particular context to a Yazidi woman whose daughters were abducted by ISIS several years ago and forced into sexual slavery. And Angelina Jolie, a very, very famous actor in Hollywood who has taken up a range of very, very interesting roles, has taken the cause of women's empowerment, and especially the plight of young Yazidi women the plight of young Yazidi women at the hands of their ISIS abductors as one of her principal causes. So she was trying to raise awareness about the abductions, about what the Yazidi girls were forced to endure at the hands of their captors: sexual violence, murder, observing the slaughter of their menfolk, their brothers, their husbands. And she said, I'm just going to use my star power to raise awareness about women's rights, and raise funds to make sure that maybe even the girls' freedom can be purchased, or once they are freed, they have an opportunity to live a better life, maybe in European countries or in Canada, or can find refuge someplace else. And also to use her star power as a gorgeous, eloquent, smart actress who has a platform of millions and millions and millions of people, on social media, for instance, to hold government's feet to the fire, to do something about these crimes in the first place. Step in, send in the troops, force the Syrian government, force the Iraqi government, force the Kurdish governments to do something about it and to help these women. That sounds it's like a worthy cause. So in other words, in the ways that she interacted with the women, and you see one here, this woman obviously is incredibly distraught because her daughters, plural, were abducted by ISIS and she didn't know where they were. She is trying, Angelina Jolie that is, to move in the role of the personification of emotion. So in other words, she is trying to emote and to kind of channel, to show and to be a mirror, if you will, of the incredibly heart-wrenching emotion that the woman is experiencing. She has been accused of just playing a role, the theatricality of politics and celebrity advocacy. So there is certainly a danger that a celebrity is not being taken seriously. So how can we judge? How can we judge whether she's genuinely earnest and whether she's genuinely kind of feeling with the survivors, with the victims? That is a big and tough question to ask, and that needs to be judged, obviously, on a case-by-case basis. But how much is theater? How much is genuine feeling and commitment and passion and empathy? Is one question that is very often raised in the field of celebrity advocacy. A scholar, Professor Budabin, said many, and I'm added the quote here to our slide. Many celebrities, many actors are clueless. It's certainly true, and speaking on, quote, behalf of a distant other that has no opportunity to give input or consent for their representation. And that is a really, really, really powerful indictment, a really very powerful point that he's raising. Because when you look at the woman, and granted, Angelina Jolie, she did not take that picture, but it is almost that we're invading that woman's grief, that we are ogling her and are intruding on her fears, on her hopes, on her grief. And it is also the representation of the woman as a victim who has no agency. Things are being done to her. So to what extent is Angelina Jolie, with her, probably I would give her the benefit of the doubt, very heartfelt concern and empathy for the woman, reinforcing stereotypes about women, in particular Middle Eastern women, particularly women, whose education stopped or never had the option for an education at a very early age, who are of economically incredibly unprivileged circumstances. To what extent are celebrities, most of them are white, very wealthy, from the top 1% of American society, reinforcing stereotypes and tropes and incredibly problematic racist and sexist and orientalist narratives, especially in the pictures, that are then being circulated, because you want to increase empathy with the people that you're trying to help, but indirectly, or directly, or inadvertently, I should rather say, you are re-victimizing them and victimizing them in a different way by speaking for them as opposed to listening and providing a platform for them. And again, hopefully inadvertently, are reinforcing very problematic narratives and presentations. And on the right-hand side, as you can see, you see an actress from the golden age of Hollywood, Audrey Hepburn, who has worked in her post-actress life, or just at the cusp of when she was becoming a private citizen in Africa. And the image of the white savior and the white savior complex is just incredibly widespread when we talk about celebrity humanitarianism. So here Angelina Jolie is speaking with, or is talking to, or listening to a brown woman. Audrey Hepburn, a young African baby, a young African child. Here, George Clooney surrounded by African children. Sorry, I'm just looking at the chat function. 5-minute warning. Okay, that works. So what we will see in the context of our conversation of celebrity humanitarianism is that most of these celebrities are actually white, and they are working or making, and I'm using that word now purposely, and I think it's incredibly offensive, making Africa or African children their cause. And I find it deeply problematic, and it needs to be unpacked a little bit more. Two more points that I would like to raise, and that have been raised in the literature, which is incredibly rich and interesting and layered and nuanced, is also the gendered nature of celebrity humanitarianism. So what causes are being taken on by men and women, and how is that reinforcing gendered stereotypes of women's concerns, both of the celebrity as well as the individuals that they are nominally, quote unquote, fighting for or protecting. And again, just the word protection that I just used is, again, incredibly suffused with the idea of, the white savior comes to the rescue of the disempowered in the dark continent. And I'm using these intentionally offensive words now to highlight how very often these causes or these cause-taking is being framed, light to the darkness. I mean, you can only, imagine. And then last but not least, one of the issues that I personally have a big problem with, I have personal problem with this entire celebrity humanitarianism, if you haven't noticed it yet, is what Bishop and Green call philanthrocapitalism. So this is to say, like Bono, for instance, advocates, if you buy any of his red products, and that can be an iPod or something else, you will save lives. So in other words, you are capitalizing philanthropy, and you're linking capitalism with philanthropy and humanitarian assistance. And again, I find that profoundly problematic, and we will discuss that in more detail in my class. Now, I want to share with you 2 or 3 more slides. And this is when we talk about people have no clue. You would be surprised that all of a sudden, if you didn't know, Ben Affleck is an Africa expert. I wasn't aware of that, but apparently he is, because people in Congress are listening to him. Why exactly? I'm not 100% sure. And there are many, many, many more examples that I could use. Now, just to get to the very last point of our, I know it's not a conversation yet, but kind of my mini lecture. The question is celebrity advocacy effective? So can we kind of overlook, all of kind of the dark sides, the dark points, the problematic points? And the answer is yes, it can be actually quite effective, and it depends on the circumstances. Celebrity advocacy, when we look at studies, when we look at reports, when we look at kind of engagement afterwards, after an actor or another celebrity has hitched their wagon to a particular cause, that social media engagement, fundraising, just public awareness is actually increasing. The key is that the person, the celebrity, has to be credible, and there has to be a direct link with their quote unquote brand or their persona and the cause that they're taking on. So what we see here in the top right corner is, of course, Oprah, who's an amazing woman, taking on the cause of girls' empowerment and girls' education in South Africa. And here, she's seen in one of the schools that she's funding in South Africa. And clearly, when Oprah speaks, when she spoke on her talk show, when she engaged others in conversation, and she spoke about the need for girls' education and the positive effects, the communal effects for the girls as well as for the community in which they live, people are pricking up their ears and money starts to flow, or at least items get put on the agenda of the State Department, of international organizations. So yes, it can be very, very effective, but there has to be a very clear link between the brand or the persona of the celebrity and the cause that they're advocating, and of course their credibility. I mean, Oprah, being a woman who has overcome incredible obstacles, has become very, very successful and has always spoken up for women's empowerment. She's, of course, a very powerful messenger, very similar to Michelle Obama, for instance, when she took on education and health and obesity, for instance, among children. George Clooney in the middle, also likewise, because he has such a big following, around the world. He's admired, he's intelligent, he's outspoken. He has a clear social conscience. He has made a great deal of difference in awareness about the genocide in Darfur, for instance. So he and Oprah, for instance, or Taylor Swift at the bottom, have, because of their celebrity status, not just impact on their followers, let's say on social media, for instance, but also because they have access to the elite, access to policymakers, access to people in the global business community, who can, philanthropic capitalism, raise the funds or initially kind of provide seed money, for lack of a better term, for their cause. Taylor Swift actually has had when you look actually at the studies that were done after her kind of speaking out about two things. One is she came out as a Democrat. She encouraged voter registration in Tennessee and in Kentucky, and she has been speaking up lately very much in favor of LGBTQ rights, and that has had a very positive impact. So after she came out as a Democrat and embraced kind of values that many of us agree with, there was a spike in, especially among young people, in voter registration in Kentucky and in Tennessee. And there has been much greater awareness, that she was able to foster in the circles where she has influence about the needs to protect trans rights, for instance, a greater awareness about young people, who identify as LGBTQ, who had taken their lives, kind of the danger of suicide. So she has made a big impact, a very, very positive impact. So this is to say celebrity advocacy can be effective, but it needs to be targeted, it needs to be credible. And so over $500 million for the AIDS fight, for instance, so it can be effective. But it needs to be very mindful of, as we talked about, 15 minutes ago, about not promoting problematic narratives, not just playing the empath, but actually doing something about it, not using a particular cause for personal kind of gratification and branding, and really focusing and intentionally centering the needs of the people and of the groups of people that these celebrities are purporting to help. So I hope you're as excited about this conversation and about many of the other ones, that we will have, that I briefly sketched about 20 minutes ago in my spring class. And I would now like to turn it over to you. And I'm just looking at the Q&A, and I'm happy to take your questions. There is a question, let's see, Professor Maier, and I'm just reading it right now, and I'm sorry, I'm coming a little bit closer because the font is very small. Professor Maier, UNHCR appointed Angelina Jolie as a goodwill ambassador. Other UN organs also appointed other celebrities as their ambassador or spokesperson. How we interpret ethics on this UN policy? Does it mean UN not consider, or should not, sorry, not consider the ethics of celebrity? Thank you. This is an excellent question. And I do, as I said earlier, and so thank you for this question. I do find some of the behavior of the celebrities, taking on causes they have no clue. Ben Affleck has no place talking about Africa. And I'm sorry, I'm bashing this man, but he's just, such a low-hanging fruit in that sense. But I don't doubt that Angelina Jolie genuinely cares about the issue. And she has star power. She has endowed a program at LSE, for instance, to study gender. So I do think, I do think that the UN is very much aware of the potentially problematic nature, and that they are very mindful whom they are appointing. So I do think Angelina Jolie it can be, and obviously is, a very effective ambassador. And I think she's using her power, for the good. And I think overall, none of us are perfect. She has done a very, very good job kind of raising awareness and speaking out for the women, you know, who do not have a voice themselves. Another question. Thank you so much, Professor Maier. What do you think about the role of the UN? Does it help or also harm by sometimes not giving populations enough voices? I'm thinking of the Rohingya in Myanmar, for example. Another excellent question. I think you're spot on. You know, the UN, as we all know, is only as powerful and as effective as its member states allow it to be. It is sometimes, too often, I would argue, hampered by the power of the Big Five on the Security Council. You know, you have who have the power to advance or to block, you know, sanctions or humanitarian assistance directly or indirectly, also through the sub-organizations. So I think the United Nations can, if they are given the power, you know, if the sub-organizations and the people who work for them, who are very committed, you know, professionals, you know, doctors, nurses, educators, what have you, development specialists, not all of them, but most of them, are deeply, profoundly committed to advancing human rights and development. But I think the UN as an institution is sometimes constrained by its own members, and quite intentionally so. Another question, what do you think about initiatives like Global Citizen that involve celebrities, musicians, and world leaders to raise awareness about different humanitarian issues? I think it can be, so thank you for that question, and we know each other, good to see you. I hope all is well. I think it can be incredibly effective, and I actually think that initiatives like Global Citizen overall, because they're much broader in their focus and they raise much more awareness, and I'm thinking awareness raising and fundraising right now, than maybe smaller initiatives, simply because of numbers. And also at the same time, the problem is, you know, that it's overly broad, and you know, it also gives a kind of warm and fuzzy feeling. Yeah, we're going to the music festivals, and you know, we're giving $20 here and there, but nothing is really changing. So I think it's not binary. It's not one or the other. I think, you know, it can be, you know, as long as initiatives stay in their lane, they say, look, you know we can't stop genocide. No, we cannot stop X, Y, and Z from happening, but we can raise awareness, we can raise money, and so on and so forth. So I think it can be useful. What do I think of Kim Kardashian's efforts regarding criminal justice reform? That's a really good question. I'm afraid I don't know enough about her efforts in that field. I'm aware that she is working in the field, but I don't have, I just don't have enough knowledge about it. Sorry. And I know who is asking the question. I'm not allowed to name names, but let's have a conversation about this at one point. Another question. Are celebrities a help or a hindrance to charities? Also for love or money, should charities pay stars? No, absolutely not. Of course, they should not pay stars. These people have enough money. Some charities do as well, but either you do it, you know, for free, or you don't do it at all. That's my personal opinion. I think that's money completely misplaced. And yes, hi again. I'm not supposed to name names, but it's great to see you again too. And thank you for asking such a terrific question. All right, I think I'm getting the flag from our wonderful administrative team. I'm just looking at the chat right now. I think I'm almost at the end of our 30 minutes. Any pressing final questions? Yes. Okay. Well, if there are no further questions, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation, for your excellent questions. If you have any follow-up questions or want to hear more about this class, please email me. My email is sm173@nyu.edu. I'm also somewhere, I think, my email is somewhere on the SPS website. I just don't know exactly where it is, but you're smart people, you can find me. I'm also on Twitter. I can't believe I'm on social media, but I am. So in any case, it's fun. All right, everyone, thanks for coming again. Please stay safe and healthy. Have a wonderful holiday season, and keep in touch. Bye, everyone.